for this session. Let me write it up here. There's something interesting about 25, 26, and 27.
Okay.
Notice that 25 is in standard format. Standard format being this. Okay? 26 is in vertex format. Vertex format being that. Well, excuse me, that's K. And then 27 is in y-intercept format, which is x minus p times x minus q. Each of these formats have their own uses that are useful depending on what it is you're trying to do. But those are your three different formats for quadratics, and you need to be familiar with each one of them.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you're given that, then you can use minus b over 2a to get the x-coordinate of the vertex, which you can then plug back into the equation to solve for the y-coordinate. On 26, you're looking at the vertex. The vertex is minus 3 minus 2. On 27, you're looking at the x-intercepts. Well, the x-coordinate of the vertex is always halfway in between the x-intercepts. So that's going to be at minus 2. No, yeah, because your x-intercepts are at minus 6 and plus 2. Halfway in between that is minus 2. So you can figure out the vertex of all three of these relatively easy. Now, identify the key feature from the given form of the function. Still not exactly sure what she means by the key feature. Oh, tell what each letter gives you when graphing from each form. I still don't quite know exactly what she means by that. In other words, over 26, H and K are the vertex. 27, P and Q are the x-intercepts. And with 25, none of these letters, I guess C, for 25, C is the y-intercept. I really don't know what A and B are. You can get the vertex by minus B over 2A, but by themselves, I'm not sure they have a meaning.
All right.
Okay. And little a over here, that's a vertical stretch factor or shrink factor. Same thing there. Those are the same little a's, incidentally. In other words, if I were to take that and put it into vertex format, my a is going to be 1/2.
Oh, all right.
Okay. So just know that A you come up with in this format is going to be the same A you come up with if it was in vertex format.
All right.
All right. Have you sent that other picture?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get it. I double clicked on that thing. Oh, maybe it was on that page and I just didn't scroll down far enough. Huh. I just assumed I was looking at the bottom of the page, but maybe I wasn't.
That's all right.
All right. Solve each equation by factoring and using the zero product property. Then solve using the discriminant and the quadratic formula.
We did 29 and 28 yesterday, but we just need to do 30.
Okay. That's right, we did, I remember. So, How can I do 30?
We have to find the square root of, or no, we have to square root x
No.
squared.
When you have an x squared and an x, you're never going to solve it by square root of both sides. The only time you can solve it by square root of both sides is when you have a squared variable, but there's no little a. There's no single a there. Nor is there in 29. So I can't take the square root of both sides in either 29 or 30, and that's because there's a v there and there's an x here. So the only way to solve 30 is as a quadratic. In other words, there's no easy way to do it. So if I'm going to put it into the form of a quadratic, what is it? What am I going to do?
So if it's a quadratic, I need standard form.
Yes.
Hang on.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Put it in standard form.
I forgot the
Put everything on one side and 0 on the other. That's the standard way to solve a quadratic. Is when you have an x squared and you have an x and you have a number, put it all on the same side, and that would leave 0 left over on the right side. So tell me what to write.
So 3x squared plus 10 plus 13x.
Put it in order, and it's not going to be plus 13x. I got to move that 13x to the left side of the equation, don't I?
Okay, so you have to subtract.
So
13x.
when I say put it in order, put that x term in the middle.
Okay.
So that's what you get when you move everything to one side.
All right.
Now, it's worth a shot at seeing if this factors. It might. It's hard to tell because it's a higher level quadratic, but get me started on it. Do as much as you can.
So, oh man, should I?
First step, split up the x's.
Okay, so I have to square root x.
No.
What?
By splitting up the x's, normally you do x and x, right? Well, x times x equals x squared, and we're looking at 3x squared. So I got to have a 3 in front of one of these. Now it works. In other words, after you split up the x's, multiply them back together again, make sure you get that term. That's the whole key. Is when you are unfoiling something, which is what we are doing now, is unfoiling it. Okay. Next step, after I've split up the x's, that's step 1. What's step 2?
We have to. Oh man.
There's only 3 steps here. You got to remember these 3 steps. They're critical to factoring.
3 steps.
First step is you split up the x's. Second step is you determine both signs.
Oh, okay. So
what do both signs have to be? You can determine that by just looking at the quadratic.
Negative and positive?
If they were negative and positive, I couldn't produce a positive 10, correct? The last step of FOIL is multiplying the 2 numbers together. Well, you're not going to multiply a negative number times a positive number and get a positive number. So the fact that I'm staring at a plus sign in front of the 10 means the signs are not opposite. It's impossible for them to be opposite. They have to be the same. Now,
Okay.
the same means either both are minus or both are plus. That's what the same means. And to figure out which one, look to the middle term. The middle term is negative, therefore they're both minus. Now, notice that whatever numbers we put have to multiply together to plus 10. Because FOIL, the L of FOIL is the last thing. That number times that number. So when you're working backwards, you have to work backwards. Okay? Now, the one thing I know for sure is that these two numbers have to multiply to what?
10.
All right, so let's look at factors of 10. There's one possibility.
5 and
There's
2.
only another one. Let's try 5 and 2. Those are the factors closest together. And that's usually the answer. So I'm just going to randomly try 5 and 2. Does that work? Does that produce the middle term? And that's all that you have to answer. We know it produces the first term and it produces the last term. The question is, does it produce minus 13x?
I'm
Okay.
I am on.
Let's
Sorry.
go through. Well, I'm just going to keep repeating myself until you remember it. Okay. The way you figure out how to produce the middle term is you do the O and the I of FOIL. Well, the O is the outside, that's minus 6x. The I is the inside, that's minus 5x. Combine them, you get minus 11x. So that doesn't work.
Okay.
Okay. So the next thing to look at is let's try the 2 there and the 5 over here. Maybe that'll give us something different. Well, that gives us minus 2x in the middle, minus 15x on the outside. Combine those, that's minus 17x. So that doesn't work either. So 2 and 5 don't work. I've tried all possible combinations of 2 and 5. Let's try 10 and 1. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. Let's try 10 there and 1 there. What's that produce in the middle?
Negative 10x.
Well, that's the insides. Is negative
Then
10x. You have to combine it with the outside. Hence, I call it my double smiley face. You got to have both smiles.
okay, so yeah,
That works.
that's negative. Yeah, it is.
Okay, we got our answer. And this is one of the rare cases, and by rare I mean 1 out of 20, end up with factors that are not the closest factors. They're 10 and 1 in this case. So that's still pretty easy, but had 10 and 1 not worked, what would I have had to do?
You would have had to.
In other words, if I can't factor this, and if 10 and 1 hadn't worked, if I couldn't produce the middle term using 10 and 1 or 1 and 10, then it's not factorable into integers. And then I got to use the quadratic formula. That's the answer of last resort. Now, you can use the quadratic formula from the beginning. I didn't need to try to factor this, although the directions do say solve each equation by factoring and using the zero product property. So let's do that. Let's not use the quadratic formula until we have to, although we could certainly, it does say then solve using the discriminant and the quadratic formula. So they want us to use both of them. So finish solving this one. In other words, to solve it is to solve for x. We haven't solved it yet, because all we've got is one thing times another thing equals 0. Now use the zero product property to solve the rest of it.
Okay. So.
Tell me what to write.
So we have to do FOIL, right?
No.
No.
We factored it. We factored it. If you were to multiply these two things back together again, you'd get that.
Oh, yeah.
That's what foiling is when you multiply two linear terms together, you get a quadratic. Unfoiling is factoring. You're unmultiplying them. It's a lot trickier. Unfactoring or factoring is a lot trickier than multiplying. Multiplying is a piece of cake. Factoring is a little tougher, but now use the zero product property, which says if you have A times B that equals 0, then set A equal to 0 and set B equal to 0. That's what the zero product property says. Anytime you have multiple things multiplied together that equal 0, then one of them has to be 0 by definition.
So then, should I start dividing them?
No.
Is that what it's saying? Just subtract. No.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set that to equal to 0. And then we're going to set that to equal to 0. That's what you do every single time.
Okay.
Now solve it. So I've got 3x minus 10 equals 0. Finish solving that. That'll tell us what 1x solution is.
So I got 3x equals 10.
Okay.
For the first solution.
No, you gotta solve for x.
Oh, okay. So divided by 3. Well, it doesn't go
You don't need it to go. That's an answer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. It doesn't have to go evenly. That is an answer, and it's rational. It's not irrational. Now, set the other one equal to 0 also. It's always what you do every single time here when you're solving using the zero product property is you set each term equal to 0. And that gives you a solution
x equals 1.
So those are your two solutions, 10/3 and 1.
Alright.
Okay. Now let's try to solve it using the discriminant and the quadratic formula. And I'm going to erase this because we don't need that anymore. I'm going to leave the answer down there because it better come out the same. Whoops. X equaled 10/3. So we had 1 and we also had 10/3. Those were the X values we came up with. Okay. Now, tell me what the quadratic formula is.
So
X equals the general formula. Always start with the general formula. Minus b
x equals. Wait. I don't.
Okay, you gotta memorize this too. Britt, you're just not gonna get anywhere unless you memorize this stuff.
Yeah, I know.
You cannot do math without memorizing stuff. If you really want to succeed at math, you got to figure out a way to memorize this stuff. If you have to use flashcards, do that. Flashcards are a wonderful technique for memorizing stuff. You get yourself a little index card, you put quadratic formula on one side, you write this on the other. And then there's all kinds of formulas. You could get another index card, says vertex format on one side, and write the vertex format formula on the other. And then you end up with a stack of index cards. Periodically go through it, shuffle it up, turn them over, and make sure you know what's on the other side of that card every single time. That's the way to memorize stuff. And that's really your only way. It looks to me like you're really having trouble memorizing this stuff. So you need to do that. if you want
yeah.
to succeed at math. You're not going to do it if you can't memorize this stuff. Okay, so what's A, B, and C?
A, B, and C.
Here's our function, or our equation.
Yeah. So B is
We'll start with A.
-30. Oh, X is.
We'll start with A. Just tell me what A, B, and C are. Don't plug it in yet. I want to make sure you know what A, B, and C are from the function.
10.
A is
10 is
3. A is the coefficient of the x squared term.
Okay.
B is the coefficient of the x term. What is B?
-13.
And what is C?
0?
It's the constant. C is always that.
Okay.
C is the coefficient of the term that doesn't have an x. Okay, so C is the number. Now plug it in.
So X equals -3.
No.
Wait, X equals -13.
No.
Plus or minus. Wait.
B is -13. What is negative B?
3. Right? Yeah, it's 3, right?
No. Here's what I get when I plug in -13. There's my original minus sign. There's my -13. When I have a negative times a negative, what does it become?
Positive.
So that's +13 is what negative B is.
Okay, so
it's 13 plus or minus.
13 plus or minus.
B squared is 169. And for the rest of it, make sure you fill it all in before you answer it. Don't do this in your head. Just fill in A and fill in C. And then it's all over 2 times 3, which is 6. So now I've got to reduce this. Well, this is 120 inside. In other words, they said solve by finding the discriminant. Well, the discriminant is the amount that's under the radical sign. In other words, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. That's what the discriminant is.
Okay.
And in our case, that's 169 minus 120. So the discriminant is 49. Okay?
Right.
So I can replace everything in there with 49, which is nice because the square root of 49 is 7. So now I've got this, 13 plus or minus 7 all over 6. Well, if I do that math, 13 plus 7 over 6, that's 20/6. That's 10/3. 13 minus 7, the other answer is 6 over 6. That's 1. Same 2 answers we got when we factored it, which is always better be the case. You better get the same 2 answers, regardless of which way you do the problem. But we did the problem 2 different ways. We factored and used the zero product property, and we also found the discriminant and used the quadratic formula, and we got the same answer.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
I will let you go. Talk to you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, Britt. Bye-bye.